The Martian sandstorm did its best to transform Marshal Talon Rook into a human sandpaper sculpture. But Rook, being the stubborn meatbag he was, simply squinted through the grit and muttered, "I've had worse on taco night." Beside him, Solara Nix, biotech engineer extraordinaire and reigning queen of cynicism, adjusted her face mask for the 8th time. "If I wanted microdermabrasion, I'd have stayed in the city," she grumbled, glaring at the horizon like it personally offended her. "Cities shut tighter than an accountant's wallet," Rook replied, pointing to the flickering hologram sign that read Quarantine Zone. "No entry without hazmat, sanity, or a damn good reason." "Lucky us we get a play in the sandbox." "Sandbox with surprises," Solara added, kicking a rock that suspiciously looked like it could sprout tentacles at any moment. "Heard some techies were poking around when they found it." Rook snorted. "Poking around? That's techie speak for let's mess with alien artifacts and see who dies first." The duo trudged on, their suit servos whining like hungover banshees. The Martian landscape lay flat and red, a testament, or testament's broke cousin, to humanity's questionable taste in real estate. Their destination, an unassuming outcrop of rock with faint alien carvings, loomed ahead. "There it is," Rook said, tapping his helmet as if it could enhance his vision. "The thing that's got the whole place in lockdown." Solara crouched down, scrutinizing the artifact with the intensity of a cat watching a laser pointer. "Looks like a paperweight," she declared. "Paperweights don't usually glow and hum," Rook pointed out, "unless you're buying them from a particularly shady vendor. Or here," Solara quipped, pulling out her scanner. The device beeped and whirred, doing its best impression of a dying robot in a soap opera. "Yeah, this is picking up some weird readings." "Weird how?" "Weird as in this thing might give you space flu weird," she replied, her sarcasm only slightly masking the edge in her voice. "Great," Rook drawled. "Another day, another plague." The artifact, as if tired of being the center of attention without delivering, decided it was time for the show to start. It pulsed once, a sickly green light emanating like a broken disco ball. Rook and Solara exchanged glances, the kind that said we're too old for this shit without uttering a word. "It's doing something," Solara observed, stepping back with a grace only panic can provide. "Looks like it's about to break into song," Rook muttered, drawing his sidearm. "Nothing like a bit of firepower to soothe the nerves." The light flickered again, and suddenly the quarantine zone felt like it was at the front row of an alien concert nobody wanted tickets for. A low hum vibrated through the air, rattling the fillings in their teeth. "I think it's singing," Solara said almost calmly. "Hope it knows Kumbaya," Rook replied, finger twitching on the trigger. But instead of a heartfelt chorus, the artifact let out a noise best described as an eldritch belch. A mist, swirling and malevolent, began to spread from its core. "Ah hell," Rook cursed, taking a step back. "That's not ominous at all." "Time to go," Solara suggested, already halfway to the rover. "Agreed," Rook said, not needing further encouragement. They sprinted, or the Martian equivalent given the gravity and sand, towards their vehicle. The rover, affectionately dubbed the Brick, awaited them like a loyal dog that secretly hoped its masters would stop getting into trouble. "Start her up," Rook ordered, jumping into the driver's seat. Solara hit the ignition, the Brick rumbling to life with all the enthusiasm of a hungover elephant. "Get us out of here, Rook." Rook gunned the engine, the rover lurching forward with a grace that could only be described as barely functional. The mist was on their tail, a relentless pursuer with the persistence of a telemarketer. "Faster, faster," Solara urged, her eyes fixed on the rear camera. "It's almost on us." "I'm flooring it," Rook shouted back, though the speedometer barely nudged past Turtle. The mist reached out, tendrils licking at the rover's rear. "It's like a B-movie monster," Solara commented, trying to keep the hysteria out of her voice. "Yeah, the kind that eats your face," Rook added, swerving around a boulder with all the finesse of a drunken fly. The Brick finally broke free of the mist, shooting into the clear Martian air like a cork from a bottle. Rook and Solara let out simultaneous breaths, realizing they'd been holding them in a misguided attempt to ward off panic. "So," Solara said after a beat, "that went well." Rook gave a wry smile, the kind that comes from narrowly avoiding death by alien artifact. Just another day on Mars. As they sped away, leaving the artifact and its gaseous nightmare behind, Rook couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get a whole lot worse. Mars wasn't exactly known for its hospitality, and now it had a new trick up its sleeve. "What now?" Solara asked, her voice carrying a hint of the grim resolve that had seen them through countless scrapes. "First, we report this mess," Rook replied. "Then we figure out what the hell that thing is. And if the higher-ups want to poke it some more, then we let them," Rook said, "from a safe distance." "Naturally," Solara agreed, her tone dry as Martian dust. The rest of the ride back to the colony was mercifully uneventful, save for the occasional sarcastic quip or grim chuckle. As they approached the city gates, the quarantine hologram flickered ominously, as if mocking their reckless curiosity. "Think they'll let us back in?" Solara mused, her eyes fixed on the looming walls. "If they know what's good for them," Rook replied, though he wasn't entirely convinced himself. The gates creaked open, and the duo entered the city that was both their home and prison. Inside, the streets were eerily quiet, the usual hustle replaced by an anxious stillness. "Looks like we're the only idiots out and about," Solara observed, glancing around. "Perks of the job," Rook replied, trying to ignore the chill creeping up his spine. They made their way to the command center, dodging the occasional security drone that buzzed past like a judgmental bee. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the kind that makes people look over their shoulders and keep their fingers near the panic button. Marshal, Engineer Barkov, their nominal superior, greeted them with a nod that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. "I take it you've seen the artifact." "Seen it, poked it, and almost got eaten by it," Rook confirmed, arms crossed. "Charmed, I'm sure," Solara added, her sarcasm a shield against the impending debrief. Barkov sighed, rubbing his temples. "The scientists are buzzing about some potentially groundbreaking discovery. Tell them to ground their discovery before it grounds us," Rook said, his patience thinner than a Martian atmosphere. "We're looking into it," Barkov assured them, though his tone suggested looking into it was bureaucratic code for standing around and hoping it goes away. "Good," Solara replied, her expression unreadable behind her visor. "We'll be in the lab trying to figure out what that thing is. Try not to break anything," Barkov warned, though it sounded more like a plea than an order. "No promises," Rook shot back, heading for the door with Solara in tow. As they walked, Solara glanced sideways at Rook. "Think we can actually crack this thing?" she asked, her voice low. Rook shrugged, a gesture that conveyed more resignation than indifference. "If we don't, someone else will, and that someone might not be as charming." They reached the lab, a cluttered mess of cables, screens, and blinking lights that screamed science was here. Solara got to work immediately, her fingers a blur over the console. "What do you make of it?" Rook asked, leaning over her shoulder. "It's alien tech, but not like anything we've seen before," Solara replied, her eyes scanning lines of data that would make lesser minds weep. "So, not the friendly kind," Rook summarized. "Definitely not," Solara agreed, her tone as somber as a Martian grave. They worked in silence, the weight of their discovery looming like a storm cloud. Outside, the quarantine zone shimmered in the Martian sun, a reminder that some things were best left buried. And yet here they were, humanity's finest, or at least most expendable, pitted against the unknown. "Think we could sell this story?" Rook mused, breaking the silence. "To who?" Solara asked, not looking up. "Anyone dumb enough to listen," Rook replied, a grin playing at the corners of his mouth. Solara chuckled, the sound a brief reprieve from the tension. "Might make a good book," she conceded. "Mars Quarantine, Humanity's Biotech Triumph in the Alien Crisis," Rook suggested, his voice dripping with mock grandeur. "Catchy," Solara admitted, "but let's survive it first." Rook nodded, the camaraderie between them a small comfort in the face of impending doom. In the end, it was just another day on Mars, a hostile planet with more secrets than sense, and a population as stubborn as the rust-colored rocks beneath their feet. As they pored over their findings, the unease grew. 1,000 questions with too few answers and a colony hanging in the balance. But for now they worked, side by side, two humans against the universe. And really, what could possibly go wrong? "You know," Rook began, fiddling with a stubborn piece of Martian sand stuck in the rover's console, "Mars really knows how to make a guy feel welcome. First, it tries to kill us with radiation, then boredom, and now this." Solara snorted from her perch across the lab, surrounded by biotech equipment that looked about as user-friendly as a porcupine in a balloon factory. "More like welcome to the how many ways can we die show," she muttered, adjusting a particularly rebellious cable. Today's episode, Alien Pathogen Roulette. They were back in the lab, the quarantine zone's little green disco nightmare still fresh in their minds. The artifact had belched out something that probably wasn't approved by any space health and safety guidelines, and now it was up to them to figure out just what flavor of doom it entailed. "Got anything from those readings yet?" Rook asked, leaning back in his chair with the kind of ease that implied he might never leave it again. Aside from a headache, Solara ran a hand through her hair, her eyes glued to the screen like it held the secrets of the universe. "It's a pathogen, all right. Alien in origin, which is great because we barely understand our own germs. Any chance it just gives you a mild case of the sniffles?" Rook asked, not even pretending to be hopeful. "If by sniffles you mean spontaneous internal combustion, then maybe," Solara replied, her tone as dry as the Martian plains. "This thing isn't playing nice." Rook sighed, the kind of deep, world-weary sigh that only existed in old noir films in the hearts of space marshals. "And we're sure it's spreading," Solara nodded, her eyes reflecting the flickering lines of data. "Unfortunately, yes, it's like glitter. Once it's out, good luck getting rid of it." "Fantastic," Rook muttered, drumming his fingers on the table. "So we need to come up with a countermeasure before the whole colony decides to audition for the next season of The Walking Dead." "Exactly," Solara agreed. "And while we're at it, let's hope we don't accidentally create a superbug that ends humanity as we know it." The lab door slid open, and a young tech stumbled in, holding a tablet like it was about to explode. His name was Jax, and he'd somehow managed to look both eager and terrified at the same time. Marshal Rook, that's what they call me," Rook replied, eyeing the kid like he was a particularly unruly space rat. "What's up, Jax?" "We've received reports from several sectors," Jax said, his voice barely above a whisper. "People are getting sick." Rook exchanged a glance with Solara, whose expression had shifted from mildly amused to serious business. "How sick?" "Flu-like symptoms at first," Jax explained, swiping through his tablet with fingers that trembled like leaves in a sandstorm. "But it progresses fast, real fast." "Great," Solara said, rubbing her temples. "Alien flu, just what we needed." "It's not just the flu," Jax added, his voice dropping lower. "Some are reporting hallucinations, nightmares. Like their brains are being rewired." "Sounds like my last visit to Earth," Rook said, though his attempt at humor fell flat against the gravity of the situation. "So it's spreading through the colony," Solara mused, her mind already working 3 steps ahead. "Which means we need to act now." Rook stood, stretching muscles that had spent too long in one position. "Okay, here's the plan. Solara, you're going to figure out what this thing is and how to stop it. Jax, I need you to get me a list of the infected and their locations. We're going to need to quarantine them fast." Jax nodded, already typing away like his life depended on it. Given the circumstances, it probably did. "And me?" Solara asked, raising an eyebrow. "You get the glamorous job," Rook replied. "Dive into that alien tech and pull out a miracle." "Just another day at the office," she muttered, though a small smile tugged at her lips. Rook took a moment to look around the lab, the hum of machines a constant reminder of the task ahead. "Think we'll manage it?" "Sure," Solara said, her tone light despite the weight of the world, or at least a Martian colony, on her shoulders. "We've survived worse, right?" "Debatable," Rook replied, but he couldn't help the grin that matched hers. They had a path forward, however shaky it might be. And if there was one thing Mars had taught them, it was to keep moving, no matter how rough the terrain. Later, in the throes of a caffeine-fueled frenzy, Solara worked the lab like a magician performing a particularly convoluted trick. Petri dishes spread across the workbench like an alien smorgasbord. She muttered to herself in a litany of scientific jargon and colorful curses. Rook, having abandoned any pretense of understanding the biotech babble, was on comms with other parts of the colony. Each call revealed more about the situation. More sick, more panic, more questions than answers. "Quarantine's holding," he relayed to Solara during a lull. "For now, but the natives are getting restless." "Funny how impending doom does that," Solara replied, eyes fixed on the glowing readouts of her equipment. "How's Barkov taking it?" "Like a champ," Rook said. "Which is to say, he's locked in his office, probably praying to whatever god handles bureaucratic nightmares." "Maybe he should try sacrificing a goat," Solara suggested. "Couldn't hurt." "Only if we get to eat it after," Rook countered. "Space rations are getting old." Their banter was easy, a well-practiced back-and-forth that kept the darkness at bay. But beneath it lay the urgency of their task, the knowledge that the clock was ticking and not in their favor. "Got something," Solara announced suddenly, her voice cutting through the tense silence like a knife. Rook perked up, pushing aside the tablet he'd been reviewing. "Please tell me it's good news." "It's news," Solara said, frowning at her results. "This pathogen is a beast, all right. It's designed to spread, to adapt. But it has a weakness." "Which is?" Rook prompted. "Humanity's stubborn resistance to dying," Solara said, a wicked grin forming. "We've got biotech enhancements they didn't count on. Our nanotech can potentially counteract it." "So you're saying we're too stubborn to die?" Rook asked, incredulous. "Pretty much," Solara confirmed. "Our implants, immune boosters, all the stuff we've been poking into ourselves for years, they might just give us the edge." Rook chuckled, a sound that once might have held hope. "Guess they underestimated us." Solara nodded, her expression a mix of grim determination and satisfaction. "Now we just have to make sure everyone else gets the memo." Rook clapped his hands together, the noise loud in the small space. "Right, let's get this show on the road." They worked tirelessly, driven by necessity and a fair amount of caffeine. The lab became a second home, a fortress against the chaos brewing outside. Sleepless hours blended into one another, punctuated by bursts of progress and the occasional spat of frustration. Jax returned periodically with updates, his presence a reminder of the world outside their lab, a world teetering on the edge. "How goes the quarantine?" Rook asked during one of Jax's visits. "Not great," Jax admitted, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "People are scared. Some are trying to break out. It's a mess." "Figures," Solara muttered. "Humans have a great sense of timing, don't they?" Rook sighed, rubbing his temples. "All right, keep them contained as best you can. We'll have something soon." As Jax left, Solara turned to Rook, a question in her eyes. "Think we can actually pull this off?" Rook shrugged, a gesture that conveyed both confidence and resignation. "We've got no choice. And it's not like we haven't been winging it since day one." "True," Solara agreed, returning to her work with renewed focus. The hours dragged on, but progress was made. The first test batch of their improvised countermeasure showed promise, a small victory that tasted bittersweet against the backdrop of their situation. "We might actually have something here," Solara said, her voice laced with cautious optimism. "Don't jinx it," Rook warned, though he couldn't suppress the spark of hope that flared within him. They prepped for a larger trial, their movements a coordinated dance of efficiency and desperation. As they worked, the weight of the colony's fate hung over them, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Solara held up a vial, glowing faintly in the sterile lab light. "Ready for testing," she announced. Rook eyed the vial like it might sprout fangs and bite. "Let's hope this stuff works better than it looks." "Only one way to find out," Solara replied, her determination a palpable force. They administered the countermeasure, their hearts pounding like the bass line of a bad techno track. And then they waited, the seconds stretching into an eternity as they watched for any sign of success. The first positive results came in a rush, a wave of relief washing over them like a long-awaited reprieve. The pathogen weakened, it spread slowing to a crawl. "We did it," Solara breathed, disbelief coloring her words. "We actually did it." Rook let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Guess humanity's stubbornness paid off. Again, they shared a weary grin, the kind that only came from staring death in the face and telling it to bugger off. But their work wasn't done. They had a colony to save, and a pathogen that wasn't entirely defeated. So they rolled up their sleeves and dove back in, fueled by hope and the knowledge that maybe, just maybe, they'd live to see another day on this red, unforgiving rock. And really, what could possibly go wrong? The Martian sunrise cast its dull, red glow over the colony, a reminder that another day of mayhem and potential death had arrived right on schedule. Rook squinted against the too bright light creeping through the lab's window, wondering for the 100th time why he ever thought relocating to Mars was a good idea. Cheaper property, they said. Better weather, they said. All it had gotten him was a perpetual sandstorm-induced exfoliation routine and a potential viral apocalypse. "Hey, Rook," Solara said, not even glancing up from her workstation where alien pathogens were the breakfast special. "You know, if this whole colony thing doesn't pan out, you could always try stand-up comedy." "I hear Martians love a good laugh. Yeah, if they have a death wish," Rook replied, smirking despite himself. "What's the latest on the bug from hell? Still nasty, still mutating faster than a politician in a scandal." Solara sighed, poking at the data as if it might suddenly start behaving. "But at least our countermeasure seems to slow it down. Like a tortoise on sedatives, but hey, progress." Rook was just about to make a snappy retort when Jax burst in, breathless and waving his tablet like a flag of surrender. "Marshal, we've got a situation." "Tell me something I don't know, kid," Rook said, although he knew Jax's frantic energy meant it was serious. "Sentinels," Jax panted, the word dropping into the room like a lead weight. "They're here." Rook felt the familiar clench of dread in his gut. Sentinels, advanced guards from the alien race known as the Vaxari, who were about as friendly as a cornered wolverine. They were the galaxy's worst bouncers, and the humans had apparently just crashed their exclusive club. "Great," Rook muttered. "First an alien bug, now alien bouncers." "What's next, alien tax auditors?" Solara stopped her work, raising an eyebrow. "What do they want?" "Probably to make sure we don't mess with their precious artifact," Rook said. "They don't trust us not to poke it until it breaks." "Can't imagine why," Solara replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Rook considered their options, which were getting slimmer by the minute. "All right, let's keep this quiet for now. No need to add mass panic to our list of problems." "Too late," Jax said with a grimace. "Words already spread faster than a viral cat video. Everyone's on edge." "Perfect," Rook sighed. "I'll handle the colony. Solara, keep working on the countermeasure. If we can't stop the Sentinels, maybe we can at least stop the pathogen from turning us into zombies." With a side of fries, Solara muttered, returning to her work. Rook left the lab, the door hissing shut behind him like an angry snake. He navigated the hallways, each step echoing his rising stress levels. The colony's corridors were bustling with people who looked like extras in a disaster movie, panicked faces, shouted questions, and the occasional conspiracy theory about reptilian overlords. Rook entered the command hub, a room filled with flickering screens and the hum of overworked machinery. At its center was Director Barkov, looking more haggard than usual, which was saying something. Barkov had the air of someone who'd been promoted just to keep him from making things worse elsewhere. "Morning, Barkov," Rook said with a cheerfulness he didn't feel. "I hear we've got company." Barkov glanced up, eyes bloodshot and wary. Marshall, if you're here to tell me this is all a big misunderstanding, I'd appreciate it. I'm here to tell you we need a plan, Rook said. And hiding under the desk doesn't count. Barkov let out a weary laugh, the sound more bitter than amused. You've got a point. What do you suggest? First, we need to keep the Sentinels at bay. If they get in here, this whole place is going down faster than a lead balloon. Any ideas on how to do that? Stall them, Rook said, with more confidence than he felt. Talk, negotiate, hell, offer them a tour of the colony's finest dirt piles. Anything to buy time. Barkov nodded, a flicker of something resembling hope crossing his features. And the pathogen, Solara's on it, Rook replied. If anyone can pull off a miracle, it's her. We just need to make sure her equipment stays intact. As if on cue, the warning klaxon blared through the hub, a sound that could only mean one thing. Trouble was here and it wasn't leaving politely. Rook glanced at the monitor displaying the colony's perimeter. The Sentinels were there, ominous in their silver armor, like intergalactic stormtroopers with a grudge. Time to roll out the red carpet, Rook muttered, striding toward the console as if facing down a pack of space wolves was something he did every Tuesday. The communication channel crackled to life, a voice smooth and cold as liquid nitrogen filtering through. Human colony, this is Vaxari Commander Kale. You are in possession of forbidden technology. Surrender the artifact and your compliance will be noted. Rook keyed the comms, adopting his best diplomatic tone, which wasn't saying much. This is Marshal Talon Rook. Nice to meet you, Commander Kale. Love what you've done with your hair. About the artifact, let's chat. We do not negotiate, the voice replied, as uncompromising as ever. You have violated our laws. Surrender now. Well, Commander, Rook said, leaning into the sarcasm like it was a lifeline, here's the thing about humanity. We're not great at surrendering, but we're fantastic at improvising. A pause heavy with calculated menace. You have one Ior. As the channel cut off, Barkov turned to Rook, his expression a mixture of disbelief and grudging admiration. I suppose that buys us some time. Yeah, Rook said, though he felt the weight of the ticking clock like a physical presence. But not much. Let's make it count. Rook left the hub, mind racing with possibilities that seemed increasingly impossible. He found Solara where he'd left her, buried in data, her determination a tangible force. Updates? She asked, not looking up. Sentinels gave us an Ior to hand over the artifact, Rook replied. I'd say they're not big on patience, Solara snorted. Vaxari and patience. Like oil and water. Or humans and following orders. Got that right, Rook agreed. Any progress? A bit, Solara said. But it's a big maybe. I'll take maybe over nope any day, Rook said, peering over her shoulder at the chaotic symphony of numbers and graphs. Solara paused, staring at the cluttered screen with all the intensity of a gambler considering a final roll of the dice. If we can boost the nanotech response time, we might be able to fend off the pathogen. Sounds promising, Rook said. How long until we know for sure? Not long, Solara replied. Problem is, we'll need to install enhancers all over the colony. Fast. Rook considered the ticking clock and the very real possibility of the Sentinels deciding to drop the hammer. All right, let's do it. Jax and I will start getting them out. Solara nodded, her focus already back on the screens. Good luck, Rook. Rook left the lab, his mind a whirl of plans and contingencies. He found Jax in the hallway, looking as if he too had been up all night, which was likely true. Jax, round up a crew, Rook said. We've got enhancers to install and the clock's ticking. Jax nodded, his expression shifting from exhaustion to determination. On it, Marshal. As Jax ran off to gather a team, Rook felt the weight of responsibility settle over him like a too-tight suit. He had to keep everyone moving, keep them alive. Because if anything was certain, it was that surrender was not an option, and defeat was a luxury they couldn't afford. The next Ior passed in a blur of activity. Rook and Jax coordinated teams to install the enhancers, turning the colony into a hive of frantic activity. Each step forward felt like a step closer to salvation or disaster, and it was anyone's guess which it would be. "Marshall," Jax called, jogging to catch up with him. "We're almost done. Few more enhancements to go." Rook nodded, his mind already a step ahead. "Good. Once it's done, get everyone ready." "We might need to make a stand." Jax's eyes widened, but he nodded. "You really think they'll attack?" "Let's just say I'm not betting against it," Rook replied. Finally, with minutes to spare, the last enhancer was installed, and Rook found himself back in the command hub, the air thick with anticipation. Barkov was there, watching the monitors with a grin set to his jaw. "They're moving," Barkov said, pointing at the screen showing the Sentinels advancing. "Well, they're punctual," Rook remarked. "Gotta give them that." The Sentinels approached the colony's perimeter, their formation precise and unyielding. Rook stood by the comms, ready to make one last appeal to reason, or whatever passed for it with the Vaxari. "Commander Kale," Rook said, his voice steady, "we're working on a solution to the pathogen. It's in everyone's interest to see it through." The comms crackled, Kale's voice cutting through. "Your solution is irrelevant. The artifact and the technology it contains are what matter." "Then stop the pathogen," Rook argued. "Let us finish what we started." Kale's response was as cold and final as a death sentence. "Your ire is up." Rook felt the weight of those words, felt the inevitability of what was to come. But he wasn't about to back down now. "All right, folks," Rook said, turning to face the hub's occupants. "Looks like we're in for a fight. Let's show them what humanity's made of." As the alarm blared and the Sentinels advanced, Rook felt a fierce pride in his people, in their stubborn refusal to roll over. They were outmatched, outgunned, but certainly not out of the fight. And as the battle began, Rook knew one thing for sure. Win or lose, the Sentinels were about to learn that humanity wasn't something you could just push around. The Martian sunrise, a dull smear of red across the horizon, was more like a half-hearted yawn than a celestial event. Rook, standing at the colony's edge, could only marvel at how even the universe managed to look bored. He'd been up all night, coordinating the chaos and trying to keep the colony from imploding, both literally and figuratively. The Sentinels were advancing, and surrender was not on the menu. A fight was inevitable, which was unfortunate since Rook had been hoping for a quiet morning of existential dread, not interstellar warfare. Back in the lab, Solara was neck-deep in data, her fingers flying over the biotech equipment with the grace of someone who had more caffeine than blood in their veins. She was onto something big. If Rook learned anything in the last few hours, it was that when Solara said she might have a plan, it was worth paying attention, even if it involved a lot of techno-babble that usually flew over his head like a rogue comet. Solara glanced up from her work, eyes bleary but sharp. "Rook, I think I've got it. The pathogen has a weakness." "Great," Rook replied, resisting the urge to do a victory jig. He was saving that for when they weren't on the brink of annihilation. "What's the catch?" "Well, it's kind of a big one," Solara said, rubbing her temples. "It turns out Earth's atmosphere has some microbial life forms that neutralize the pathogen. The trick is replicating it here. So we just need to recreate Earth's entire ecosystem on Mars," Rook said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Why didn't we think of that sooner?" "Yeah, just a minor inconvenience," Solara replied, matching his tone. "But seriously, we can synthesize a similar bacterium using our existing biotech. Problem is, we need to deploy it across the colony fast." "Fast, huh?" Rook said, glancing at the monitors showing the Sentinel's steady approach. "I'm guessing we don't have a lot of time for a celebratory drink first." "Not unless you want it to be your last," Solara replied, turning back to her equipment. "We need to install these new bioenhancers alongside the ones we just placed. It'll amplify the bacterium's spread." Rook nodded, already formulating a plan. "All right, I'll get Jax and the others moving. We'll play hide and seek with the Sentinels until we can get this done." "Good luck," Solara said, her eyes returning to the glowing screens like they held the secrets of the universe. Rook suspected they just held a malfunctioning Windows Vista. As Rook made his way through the colony, he found Jax directing a group of harried colonists in a fashion that only a man who had seen too many disaster movies could. Jax spotted Rook and jogged over, his expression a mix of hope and caffeine-fueled determination. "Tell me you've got good news," Jax said, his eyes wide. "So Lara's onto something," Rook replied. "We've got enhancers to install, and they need to go up faster than a Martian sandstorm." Jax nodded, a grin spreading across his face. Finally, something to do other than panic. The colony was a hive of activity, everyone moving with the frenetic energy of a group that knew their lives depended on it. As they installed the enhancers, the Sentinels continued their march, each step echoing like the ominous tick of a clock winding down. "Rook," Jax called, hurrying over with a tablet in hand. "We've installed most of them, but there might be a problem. The Sentinels are getting closer. If they breach the perimeter, we're toast." Rook took a deep breath, his mind racing. "All right, we need to draw their attention away from the colony. Keep them focused on us while the enhancers do their magic. And how do you plan to do that?" Jax asked, skepticism lacing his voice. Rook grinned, a reckless edge in his eyes. "We hit them where it hurts. The plan was simple, in the way that jumping off a cliff is simple. Rook, Jax, and a handful of volunteers would create a diversion, leading the Sentinels away from the colony while the enhancers spread the synthesized bacterium. It was risky, without a doubt, but it was also their best shot at survival. "All right, folks," Rook said, addressing the ragtag group that had volunteered for what was essentially a suicide mission. "We're going to give the Sentinels a little Martian hospitality. Make some noise, kick up some dust, and then get the hell out of Dodge." "Sounds like a plan," one of the volunteers said, checking the charge on his plasma rifle. "A terrible plan, but a plan." "Hey, I never said it was a good plan," Rook replied, earning a few chuckles from the group. "But it's the only one we've got." As they moved out, the colony behind them bristled with activity, everyone working to deploy the enhancers as quickly as possible. The Sentinels, their silver forms glinting in the Martian sun, were an ominous presence on the horizon. "All right, Jax," Rook said as they took their positions. "Let's make some noise." The diversion began with a bang, literally. The team set off a series of controlled explosions, the ground shaking beneath them as plumes of red dust erupted into the air. It was a spectacle, to say the least, and it caught the Sentinels' attention like a shiny object in a magpie's nest. "There they go," Jax said, watching as the Sentinels diverted their course, heading toward the source of the commotion. "Just like moths to a flame," Rook muttered, adrenaline pounding through his veins. "All right, everyone, time to move." The group sprinted across the Martian terrain, the Sentinels in pursuit. Rook could feel the weight of each moment, the knowledge that every second they bought was one step closer to salvation, or oblivion. It was a gamble, and he wasn't sure they'd win. Behind them, the colony continued its frantic work, Solara coordinating the deployment of the enhancers with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra on the verge of chaos. She was in her element, and Rook could only hope it would be enough. "Jax, how are we doing?" Rook called, his voice barely audible over the rush of their footsteps. "We're holding them off, but they're not slowing down," Jax replied, glancing over his shoulder at the approaching Sentinels. "They're persistent, I'll give them that." "Yeah, well, so are we," Rook said, gritting his teeth. "Keep moving." The chase led them across the rough Martian landscape, the Sentinels relentless in their pursuit. Every so often, Rook glanced back, half expecting to see them right on their heels. But they were holding their own for now. Suddenly, a flash of light seared through the air, a Sentinel weapon firing a warning shot that exploded in a blaze of energy just ahead of them. It was a reminder, a not-so-subtle nudge that the Sentinels weren't playing games. "Time to pick up the pace." Rook shouted, pushing himself harder. He could almost hear his body protesting, his muscles screaming for respite, but he ignored it. There'd be time to rest when they were dead. As they sprinted, the colony loomed in the distance, a bastion of hope amidst the desolation. Rook's mind raced with the possibilities of victory, of defeat, of everything in between. But right now, all he could do was keep moving, keep fighting. Then, as they crested a ridge, Rook saw it, a flash from within the colony, a signal that the enhancers were deployed and the synthesized bacterium was spreading. They had done it. Now it was a matter of holding out long enough for the plan to work. There, Jax shouted, pointing to a rocky outcrop that offered some semblance of cover. We can make a stand there. Rook nodded, leading the group toward the outcrop. They took up positions, weapons ready, the sentinels closing in. It was a last stand of sorts, and Rook felt the weight of it settle over him like a leaden shroud. "All right," Rook said, taking a deep breath. "This is it. Let's show them what humanity's made of." The sentinels were upon them, their silver forms gleaming ominously in the harsh light. It was a fight they couldn't win, a last-ditch effort to buy time. But if there was one thing humanity was good at, it was making a point and doing so loudly. The battle was chaos, a cacophony of noise and energy as the sentinels advanced. Rook held his ground, firing with a determination born of desperation. But as the fight raged, he could feel hope slipping through his fingers like sand. Then, just as things seemed their bleakest, a change swept over the sentinels, a hesitation, a faltering in their relentless advance. Rook blinked, hardly daring to believe it, but it was there, a shift in the tide. "It's working," Jax shouted, his voice barely audible over the din. "The pathogen, it's neutralizing." Rook felt a surge of hope, a spark amidst the darkness. They had done it. Against all odds, they had held on long enough. The sentinels, caught off guard by the unexpected countermeasure, began to retreat, their formation breaking apart like shattered glass. Rook watched, hardly daring to breathe as the sentinels withdrew. It was a retreat, not a victory, but it was enough. They had survived, and for now, that was all that mattered. As the dust settled, Rook looked around at his team, their faces streaked with grime and exhaustion. They had done the impossible, and though the future was uncertain, they had proven that humanity was not something to be trifled with. For now, at least, they had earned a reprieve. But Rook knew better than to rest easy. The sentinels would be back, and next time they would not be so easily deterred. But for now, as the harsh Martian sun dipped low on the horizon, they had a chance. A slim one, but a chance nonetheless. And on Mars, that was more than they could have hoped for. Rook was pretty sure he'd never signed up for this level of madness when he decided to colonize Mars. No one mentioned the surprise alien invasion in the brochure. Maybe he should have read the fine print instead of just looking at the glossy images of terraformed fields and fake Martian squirts. "All right, let's get this straight," he said, pacing back and forth like an overcaffeinated meerkat. His boots crunched on the gritty Martian soil, a constant reminder of where they were and how far they were from anything resembling home. "We've got a colony that's one sandstorm away from being buried alive. And now, to add to the fun, there's a pathogen on the loose that spreads faster than a rumor in a small town." Jax, who had somehow found time to acquire a black eye since the last time Rook saw him, shrugged. "At least it's never boring. Boring's underrated," Rook replied. "If I wanted excitement, I'd have stayed on Earth and joined the circus." And to top it all off, Solara added, entering the scene with her usual lack of fanfare, "The sentinels are back and they've brought friends. I just love it when we're popular." Rook scratched his head, staring at the monitors. The sentinels were regrouping on the horizon, a metallic tide ready to crash over them. Each one looked as friendly as an IRS audit. "How's the pathogen containment going?" Solara sighed, her expression somewhere between a grimace and a smirk. "Oh, it's going great if you consider half the colony coughing up their lungs a success. Otherwise, it's a bit of a mess." "So, same old story," Rook said, trying to inject a bit of levity into the situation. "At least we're consistent." "Consistently screwed," Jax muttered, rubbing his bruised eye. Rook shook his head and turned to Solara. "You're the only one with a plan that doesn't involve running around like headless chickens, Solara. What have you got?" Solara tapped her fingers against the biotech equipment. the digital readouts reflecting in her glasses. We need to replicate Earth's ecosystem here, which is as easy as teaching a fish to ride a bicycle. But if we can pull it off, the microbial life forms might just neutralize the pathogen. Great, Rook said with a mock cheerfulness that didn't quite reach his eyes. All we need is a miracle and a couple of unicorns, and we're set. As long as the unicorns can crap oxygen and bacteria, we should be fine, Solara quipped. Just then Jax's tablet beeped, jolting them back to the reality that was far less entertaining than their banter. Rook, we've got another problem, of course we do, Rook replied, rolling his eyes. What's it this time? Did someone decide to open a portal to hell just to see what would happen? Close, Jax said, handing over the tablet. Looks like some of our lovely neighbors have decided to hop into bed with the Vaxari. Rook stared at the data on the screen, his mind wrestling with the implications. A hidden alliance with the Vaxari. That's just stellar. As if we didn't have enough stabbing us in the back already. Guess some folks just can't resist a good betrayal, Solara said dryly. It's practically a human tradition at this point. Why would they do it? Jax asked. I mean, what's the benefit? The Vaxari aren't exactly the sharing type. I dunno, Rook shrugged. Maybe they think the grass is greener on the other side, or in this case the desert is redder. Solara tapped her chin thoughtfully. Could be they are desperate, or stupid, or both. I'm leaning towards both, Rook nodded. All right, so we've got a rogue element in the colony working with our metal friends. We need to figure out who they are and shut them down before we get caught in the crossfire. Jax shifted uneasily. And how do we do that without making ourselves the next target? Carefully, Rook replied. And with a side of reckless abandon. We'll need to keep this quiet, Solara said. If word gets out, it'll be chaos. More chaos, I mean. Right, Rook agreed. Because we definitely don't have enough of that already. The three of them huddled together, the weight of their predicament heavy enough to fill a Martian crater. If they didn't act fast, the colony was as good as toast, burnt, crispy, and about as useful as a solar panel in a snowstorm. Let's split up, Rook decided. Cover more ground, see if there's anyone acting a bit too friendly with our alien guests. Lovely, Solara said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Because nothing says fun like a witch hunt in space. Every day's a party, Jax chimed in, the bruising on his face a stark reminder of just how brutal the festivities could be. As they went their separate ways, the seriousness of their task weighed heavily on their shoulders. It felt like they were playing a game of whack-a-mole, except the moles were armed and the stakes were everyone's lives. Rook made his way through the colony, scanning faces, looking for anything out of the ordinary. It was like finding a needle in a haystack, if the hay was on fire and the needle was trying to kill you. He passed by a group of colonists huddled around a table, their expressions tense and whispering in hushed tones. Rook approached, his presence hardly a comfort. Evening, folks, he said with an air of nonchalance. Having a meeting without me, the group stiffened, their eyes darting around like guilty teenagers caught sneaking out past curfew. Just discussing strategy, one of them said, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. You know, to deal with the sandstorms and all, right, Rook replied, nodding slowly. Because that's the biggest concern right now. He lingered a bit longer, just enough to sow a seed of paranoia, and then moved on. He had a feeling they were hiding something, but without proof, his hands were tied. For now. Meanwhile, Solara was in the lab, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she pulled up data streams and cross-referenced logs. The colony's network was a tangled web of information, and she was determined to find the spider in the midst of it all. Beside her, one of the lab techs was examining a petri dish, oblivious to the chaos outside. You think we'll make it? He asked, not looking up from his work. Solara smirked. Define make it. If you mean limping by until the next disaster, then sure, we have a shot. The tech chuckled, though it was a hollow sound. Good to know we've got a plan. Yeah, a plan, Solara muttered under her breath. If only we had a clue. Back in the main control room, Jax was busy pretending he knew what he was doing with the colony's security system. It was mostly guesswork, but desperation made for a surprisingly effective teacher. He flipped through the surveillance feeds, looking for anything that screamed treason or "I'm working with the bad guys." Not that it would have been that obvious, but he could dream. A flash on one of the monitors caught his eye, two colonists in a heated exchange, their gestures animated. One of them passed something to the other, a package quickly stuffed into a pocket. Jax leaned in closer, trying to catch a glimpse of their faces. He tapped the screen, sending the feed to Rook's station with a note. "Suspicious activity, check this out." Across the control room, Rook's screen blinked with the incoming alert. He opened the feed, watching the loop of the exchange. The faces were familiar, though he couldn't quite place them. But that didn't matter. He had his lead. "All right," he said to himself, grabbing his gear. "Let's see what these jokers are up to." He left the control room, slipping through the corridors with a practiced stealth. If he was going to confront them, he'd need to be quick and discreet. Two things that rarely went hand in hand, but he'd make do. Meanwhile, Solara had stumbled upon something interesting in the data logs, a series of communications flagged as anomalous. They were encrypted, but in a way that suggested someone was trying not to be noticed. "Bingo," she said softly, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Looks like we've found a smoking gun." She forwarded the information to Rook, knowing he'd be able to use it in his investigation. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Back in the corridors, Rook caught sight of the two colonists from the surveillance footage, ducking into a storage room. He approached carefully, staying in the shadows until he was close enough to hear their conversation. "What do you mean they're onto us?" One of them hissed, their voice a harsh whisper. "The comm logs," the second replied nervously. "Someone's been snooping around." "If they find out, they won't," the first interrupted. "Not if we handle this right." Rook listened intently, weighing his options. He could storm in, guns blazing, but that would be a quick way to turn the entire colony against him. He needed finesse, subtlety, a chance to catch them red-handed. But subtlety had never been his strong suit. With a resigned sigh, he stepped into the room, his presence like a bucket of cold water on a hot day. The colonists froze, their eyes wide and guilty as sin. "Evening, gentlemen," Rook said casually, as if he'd simply stumbled upon them by accident. "Mind if I join the party?" The first colonist recovered quickly, plastering on a smile. "Marshal Rook, what a surprise." "We were just save it," Rook cut in, his tone sharp enough to cut steel. "I've got comm logs, surveillance footage, and a crapload of suspicion. So why don't you tell me what's really going on?" The second colonist shifted uneasily, glancing at his companion for reassurance. "We're just trying to survive, you know. Things are tough, and the Vaxari, you decided to make a deal with the devil," Rook finished for him. "And now you're surprised there's a price to pay." The first colonist's smile faded, his expression hardening. "We're doing what we have to. For the colony." "Funny," Rook said, "because from where I'm standing it looks like you're doing it for yourselves." There was a tense silence, the air crackling with unspoken threats. Rook held his ground, waiting to see how this would play out. Finally, the first colonist shrugged, an air of resignation about him. "All right, Marshal, what's your price?" Rook raised an eyebrow. "You're offering to bribe me." "I'm offering to make a deal," the colonist corrected. "You turn a blind eye and we'll make sure the colony gets some of the benefits." Rook considered the offer, a part of him tempted by the promise of an easier life. But he knew better. Deals like this never ended well. "Sorry," he said, shaking his head. "I'm not for sale, and neither is this colony." The colonists exchanged a look, then nodded in unison. "All right, Marshal. Guess we'll have to do this the hard way." Rook felt a flicker of unease as the first colonist reached for a weapon, but he was ready. He drew his own sidearm, leveling it at them with a steady hand. "Let's not make this uglier than it needs to be," Rook said. "You're coming with me, and we're going to have a nice, long chat about loyalty and consequences." The colonists hesitated, weighing their options. But in the end, they didn't have a choice. They surrendered, grumbling under their breath as Rook led them out of the storage room. As he escorted them through the corridors, he couldn't help but wonder how many more were like them, how deep the Vaxari's influence ran. But he pushed the thought aside. one problem at a time. They reached the control room where Solara and Jax were waiting. Rook gestured to the prisoners. Caught these two making a deal with the wrong crowd. Solara nodded, her expression grim. We'll need to interrogate them. Find out how far this goes. Jax looked at the prisoners with a mix of pity and disdain. You really thought you could pull this off? The first colonist glared at him. We're just trying to. Rook had always thought that Martian sandstorms were something like politicians, big, blustery, and full of hot air. But standing at the colony's edge, he realized they had one major difference. Sandstorms actually posed a real threat. Sand had a way of getting into everything, like glitter at a craft fair, or existential dread during a midlife crisis. But existential dread would have to wait. Rook had more pressing issues, namely, the two colonists grumbling behind him, each one with the hangdog look of someone who'd bet their last Mars bar on a losing horse. The colony's dome loomed like an oversized snow globe, minus the snow, fun, and reason to exist. Solara met him at the airlock, her expression a cocktail of irritation and relief. You bring me a present, Rook, 2 more mouths to feed. They're not exactly here for dinner, Rook replied. In fact, I was hoping you'd whip up something to cure their poor judgment. Right, because my degree in biotech engineering totally covers fixing stupid, she said, rolling her eyes. Hey, we heard that. The taller of the captives snapped, his bravado more fragile than a Martian sunrise. Rook smirked. And you'd better be grateful. If Solara here can't fix stupid, she'll settle for breaking it. As they dragged the prisoners into the lab, Rook couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to go sideways. He always trusted his gut, an old survival instinct honed from years of dealing with bad decisions and worse company. Solara shoved the taller colonist onto a stool and turned to her console, tapping keys with the precision of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. So, any bright ideas on how we stop a Vaxari sentinel from turning this colony into a smoking crater, besides running and screaming? Rook shrugged. I was hoping you could tell me. She didn't look up. We've got Earth's microbial life forms back-burnered in the lab. In theory, they can neutralize the pathogen. In practice, well, we might as well be using a water pistol against a forest fire. Why so optimistic? Rook quipped. I'm sure we can find a way to make it worse if we try really hard. Jax wandered in, the bruise on his face now a tasteful shade of Martian sunset. He waved a tablet like it was a winning lottery ticket. Guess what I found? Our friends here are part of a rogue faction. Not just any faction, mind you. These idiots were trying to broker a deal with the Vaxari. The taller prisoner sneered. It's called survival, you jackass. Funny, Jax replied, because I always thought survival involved not selling out your own species. Before the prisoner could retort, Solara glanced up from her screen. We might not have to worry about any of that. I found something peculiar in the data logs. Rook raised an eyebrow. Peculiar how? I mean, besides the obvious. Turns out the Vaxari aren't as unified as they want us to believe. There's a splinter group who disagrees with the whole wipe out the humans agenda. So, aliens are just like us after all, Rook said dryly. Too many opinions and not enough common sense. Exactly, Solara replied, ignoring the sarcasm. If we can reach out to this splinter group, they might help us. They've got technology light years ahead of our duct-tape dreams. And why would they help us? Jax asked, skepticism dripping from his voice like oil from a leaky rover. Solara grinned, a rare sight that usually preceded trouble or a breakthrough. They've got issues with the mainstream Vaxari leadership. Something about equality and coexistence. They want to make a statement and we're the perfect billboard. Rook mulled it over. All right, how do we get in touch with these cosmic rebels? The second prisoner snorted, earning a glare from Rook. I can help with that, he said reluctantly. We had contact with them. That's part of what we were doing before you so rudely interrupted. Solara shot him a look. And you didn't think to mention this earlier. Wasn't sure I could trust you, he admitted. But now it looks like we're all in the same leaky boat. Rook nodded to Solara, who reluctantly handed the prisoner a comm device. All right, you've got one chance. Make it count. As the prisoner fiddled with the device, Rook watched closely, ready to intervene if things went south. The colony might have been a glorified tin can, but it was their tin can, damn it, and he'd be damned if some alien politics were going to change that. The comm crackled to life, a series of clicks and hums signaling an incoming transmission. The voice that followed was low, resonant, and distinctly alien. "This is Xyler of the Vaxarian Splinter, who dares to contact us." Rook glanced at Solara, who gave a nod of encouragement, though it might have been a grimace. "Marshal Talon Rook of the Mars colony, we need your help." There was a pause, then Xyler replied. "Why should we help you, human? What do you offer us?" Rook leaned forward, his tone edged with urgency. "An opportunity. You help us and we'll be living proof that your way works, that humans and Vaxari can coexist." Another pause, longer this time. Rook imagined Xyler pondering the offer, weighing the risks and rewards like a gambler with too much at stake. "Very well," Xyler finally replied. "We will assist you. We require coordinates and time for the operation. Do not mistake our aid for friendship, human." "This is a transaction." "Got it," Rook said. "No hard feelings, just business." The comm went silent, leaving a heavy anticipation in the air. Solara exhaled slowly, her tension mirroring everyone else's. "Well," she said, "looks like we've got ourselves a deal with the devil's cousin." Jax chuckled, shaking his head. "Hope you know what you're doing, Rook." "If I did, I wouldn't be here," Rook replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "But it's too late to back out now. We've got a colony to save." The rogue prisoners exchanged a glance, their earlier defiance tempered by the reality of their situation. For now, they were allies, or at least not immediate threats. Rook could live with that, mainly because the alternative was too depressing to contemplate. As they prepared for the upcoming battle, the tension in the air was palpable, like the moment before a sandstorm hit. Rook watched his team, a mismatched band of survivors clinging to a barren rock in the void, and felt a flicker of something almost like hope. Sure, it was probably gas, but he'd take what he could get. Solara was back at her console, coordinating the logistics of their desperate gambit. "We'll have to time this perfectly. Any screw-ups and we're done." "Don't remind me," Rook said. "I like to focus on one existential crisis at a time." The prisoners, now reluctant comrades, were given tasks under careful supervision. Everyone had a role to play, even if it was just to avoid getting in the way. Rook paused at the doorway, looking back at the team before heading to his quarters for a rare and much-needed moment of solitude. He had a feeling it might be the last time he could catch his breath before everything hit the fan. The room was sparsely furnished, just a bunk, a small table, and a view of the Martian landscape that never failed to remind him of his poor life choices. He flopped onto the bunk and closed his eyes, letting the quiet wash over him like a balm. But silence had a way of dragging your thoughts to places you'd rather avoid, and soon enough he was back on his feet, restless. "Plan, huh?" he muttered to himself, staring out at the red horizon. "Hope it's a good one." The next morning the colony was a flurry of activity, everyone moving with a purpose that belied the chaos just beneath the surface. As dawn broke, if you could call it that, on Mars, Rook felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. He found Solara in the lab, organizing the final pieces of their plan. She looked up as he entered, her eyes tired but determined. "Ready to welcome our new friends?" "Not really, but when has that ever stopped us?" "Good point." She handed him a data pad, her expression serious. "This is it, Rook. If this doesn't work—" "It'll work," he said, more out of habit than conviction. "We've come this far, right?" "Yeah," she replied, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "Might as well see it through to the bitter end." Around them, the colony buzzed with the collective energy of people who knew they might not see another sunrise, Martian or otherwise. It was a sobering thought, but also liberating in its way. Rook gathered his team for one last briefing, the weight of command settling on his shoulders like an old, uncomfortable coat. He scanned their faces, each one showing a mix of fear, determination, and a little bit of madness. just the way he liked it. "All right, here's the deal," Rook began, his voice carrying across the room. "We're about to pull off one hell of a stunt. The Vaxari splinter group is our best shot. Stick to the plan and remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who comes after us." Jax chimed in, his voice laced with sarcasm. "So no pressure then." "Exactly," Rook replied with a grin. "Just another day in paradise." With that, they moved out, each step taking them closer to the point of no return. Rook felt the familiar adrenaline surge, the anticipation of battle mixed with the grim reality of what was at stake. There was no room for second guesses or regrets, only action. As they approached the rendezvous point, Rook glanced at Solara, who was checking her equipment one last time. "Ready for this?" "Not even a little," she replied. "But here we are." The Vaxari splinter group's ship appeared on the horizon, sleek and ominous against the backdrop of the Martian sky. Rook took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "Showtime," he muttered. And then they were moving, the plan unfolding in a blur of motion and chaos. Rook led the charge, his mind focused on the task at hand, pushing aside the doubts and fears that clawed at the edges of his consciousness. In the end, it all came down to this: humanity's stubborn refusal to go quietly into the night, a testament to their resilience and a grim reminder of their frailty. But for better or worse, they were in it together, and they would see it through to the end, or die trying. Rook crouched behind a rock that was about as useful for cover as a Martian umbrella, squinting through the red haze at the Vaxari splinter group's ship. It hovered above them like a cosmic vulture, waiting to pick apart the scraps of their little plan if things went sideways. And knowing his luck, sideways was the default setting. "All right, everyone knows what to do," Rook said, addressing his ragtag band of survivors. "We screw this up, we're as good as toast. Martian toast. Which doesn't exist, cause nothing grows here, so let's not become it." Jack snorted, adjusting his grip on the hefty plasma cutter-turned weapon. "Lovely pep talk there, Marshall. Real confidence booster. I'm not here to hold your hand, Jax. Besides, I didn't bring a soothing playlist," Rook shot back. Meanwhile, Solara was busy with her biotech equipment, the kind that was either going to save them or explode fantastically. "This artifact's got enough alien mojo to neutralize the pathogen, if we're lucky. Or at least slow it down long enough for us to stop the Vaxari from turning us into Martian pudding." "Great. Just like Mum used to make," Jax mumbled, hands twitching on his trigger. Solara pressed a few buttons on her console, a hologram of microbial life forms dancing above the screen like a microscopic disco. "This should replicate Earth's microbial ecosystem, just enough to give the pathogen a swift kick. If it works, we might walk out of this with all our bits intact." Emphasis on might, Rook added, scanning the horizon. "Don't count your microbes before they hatch." With a nod from Solara, Rook signaled the go-ahead. Suddenly, the rocky Martian terrain was alive with motion. Jax and a few other colonists moved forward, keeping low, like they were sneaking past a sleeping warden rather than an alien death squad. The Vaxarian splinter group had agreed to help disrupt the main Vaxari forces, but they weren't doing charity work. Their ship was a sleek, formidable beast, full of tech that made human efforts look like they'd been cobbled together by particularly inventive cave dwellers. "Got visuals on the Sentinels," Jax reported over the comms. "They don't look happy. Would you be, if you had to march around this rock?" Rook replied, peering through a pair of binoculars that had seen better days. "Just remember, aim for the fancy bits. Their tech has got more blinking lights than a casino." The plan was as simple as it was insane. Use the artifact to neutralize the pathogen, distract the Sentinels, and keep the colony from becoming a footnote in alien history. Easy, right? "Solara, fire it up," Rook ordered. "Time for the pathogen to meet its match." "Consider it done," Solara said, fingers dancing over the console. The biotech equipment hummed to life, an eerie green glow casting her face in alien light. "If we get out of this, remind me to ask for a raise." The artifact's energy pulsed, a low thrum that vibrated through the very rock beneath their feet. It was like standing next to a giant cat purring ominously. Rook supposed there were worse ways to spend what could be his last day alive. Jax's voice cut through the tension. "Rook, I think they've noticed." Sure enough, the sentinels were regrouping, their formation tighter than a miser's purse strings. They moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, or at least one that hadn't skipped its last service check. "Stick to the plan," Rook barked, though his voice might have wavered just a bit. Not that anyone was in a position to make fun of him for it. "Distract them while Solara works her magic." As Jax and the others engaged the sentinels, Rook stayed close to Solara, ready to provide cover. Plasma blasts lit up the dusty air, painting the Martian landscape in flickering shadows. It was the kind of firefight that made old war movies look like playground squabbles. "Just a little more," Solara muttered, more to herself than anyone else. The artifact's energy was building, a crescendo that promised either salvation or disaster. Maybe both. Rook spared a glance at the Vaxarian ship. The splinter group was holding up their end of the bargain, using their superior tech to disrupt the main Vaxari forces. He had to admit, it was kinda nice having aliens on their side for once, even if it felt like shaking hands with a shark. "Here goes nothing," Solara shouted. The artifact released its energy in a spectacular burst, a wave of green light washing over the battlefield. The pathogen didn't stand a chance, its hold on the colony breaking like a cheap lock under a crowbar. The sentinels stumbled, their synchronization faltering. It was the opening they needed. "Now," Rook commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Hit them hard." The colonists surged forward, united by desperation and a shared sense of "we're too young to die." As the sentinels scrambled to regain their footing, Rook couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. Sometimes, even a ragtag band of underdogs could teach an old alien dog new tricks. Jax whooped, a sound that was part triumph, part sheer relief. "Looks like they are on the back foot, Rook." For now, Rook cautioned, though a rare smile tugged at his lips. "Let's keep it that way." The tide had turned. As the Vaxari retreated, their plan unraveled faster than a cheap sweater. The colonists pressed their advantage, every setback only fueling their determination. Solara joined Rook, a hint of pride in her voice. "We actually did it, didn't we?" For the moment, Rook replied, refusing to let his guard down just yet. "But let's not start planning the victory parade." The Vaxari splinter group's ship descended, the massive doors opening to allow their allies back on board. Xyler's voice crackled over the comms. "Your plan succeeded, human. We have what we need to make our statement." "Glad to be of service," Rook replied, trying to ignore the part of him that wondered what exactly that statement would entail. "Remember this alliance," Xyler warned, a hint of steel in his voice. "We may cross paths again." "Looking forward to it," Rook said with zero sincerity. "Safe travels, Xyler." As the Vaxarian ship departed, Rook allowed himself a moment to breathe. The battle was over, at least for now. The colony was safe if battered and bruised, and the pathogen was no longer an immediate threat. Solara gave him a nudge. "Not bad for a bunch of misfits on a dusty rock." Not bad at all," Rook agreed, letting out a long breath. "Could have gone worse." "Could have gone better, too," Jax chimed in, ever the pessimist. "But I'll take it." They stood together, the surviving colonists slowly gathering around. It was a scene of exhausted triumph, victory tinged with the weariness of knowing it was just one battle in a long, unending war. Rook turned to his people, raising his voice so it reached everyone. "We did good today. But remember, this is just the beginning. Mars might be a lousy home, but it's our home. And we'll fight tooth and nail to keep it." A ragged cheer rose up, defiant and proud. They'd face the odds and come out the other side, scarred but unbroken. As the sun set on another Martian day, Rook felt a sense of camaraderie, a bond forged in the fires of battle. Solara nudged him again, this time with genuine warmth. "We did it, Rook." "Against all odds, yeah," he said, a note of disbelief in his voice. "Who would have thought?" Marshal Talon Rook, accidental hero, Jax teased, though his smile was genuine. Has a nice ring to it. Don't get used to it, Rook replied, shaking his head. I'm more into the survival expert gig. Less glamorous, but it keeps you alive. They stood in silence for a moment, watching as the last traces of daylight slipped behind the Martian horizon. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time in a long while, it felt like maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Let's get back to the colony, Rook said finally, the weight of command settling back on his shoulders. There's work to be done. As they trudged back across the dusty landscape, the adrenaline slowly fading, Rook allowed himself a moment of reflection. They'd faced the storm and come out stronger for it. He glanced at Solara, who was busy analyzing the data from the battle, no doubt plotting their next move. Think we'll ever get a break? Doubtful, she replied with a snort. But that's life, right? One crisis at a time. True enough, Rook said, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. Here's to the next one. With that, they marched on towards whatever lay ahead. Together, they'd face whatever challenges Mars threw their way. After all, it was the human thing to do. The Martian winds had finally decided to take a coffee break, leaving the colony with a momentary respite. Rook trudged back into the dome, a weary grin on his face that suggested he'd just survived a particularly grueling family reunion. The air inside was stale and metallic, like someone had tried to bottle Mars and sell it as a hipster cologne. You know, Jack said, his plasma cutter slung over his shoulder like an oversized fly swatter, if we keep making plans like this, we're gonna need to print Lucky Idiot on our ID badges. Rook snorted. Already got Marshall on mine, which is basically the same thing. Solara was waiting for them, her biotech equipment sprawled around like the aftermath of a toddler's science fair. She looked up from a tangled mess of wires and sighed. And here I thought my talents were wasted here. Turns out, bioengineer/alien deterrent wasn't on the job description. Well, at least you got to play with alien tech, Rook replied, sitting down heavily. I just got shot at. Call it a perk of the job, Solara said dryly, her fingers deftly dismantling a piece of the biotech. Speaking of which, this stuff's got more potential than I thought. Could be we stumbled upon more than just a pathogen cure. Jax plopped down beside them, his expression torn between curiosity and dread. You mean there's more alien nonsense we have to deal with? Possibly, Solara said, her voice dripping with the kind of optimism that usually precedes disaster. But it could be helpful. Maybe even turn this rust bucket of a colony into something resembling a livable habitat. Can you imagine? Rook leaned back, his eyes on the dome's ceiling. Mars as a vacation spot. Come for the thrill of near-death experiences, stay for the amazing views of endless sand. Jax chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. And the sunsets are to die for. Literally, if you're caught outside. They shared a moment of camaraderie, basking in the afterglow of not being dead. The colony had taken a beating, but it was still standing, a testament to human stubbornness. Sure, it looked like a discount version of a post-apocalyptic film set, but it was theirs. Think the Vaxari will be back? Solara asked, her tone casual but with an undercurrent of genuine concern. Rook shrugged. They might, but we've got a few tricks up our sleeve now. Thanks to you, Solara, we might even turn Mars into a place worth fighting for. Jax leaned forward, his expression sobering. We need to be ready. Last thing we want is to be caught with our pants down again. Rook nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. We'll stay on our toes, keep improving. Hell, maybe we'll even figure out how to grow something other than rocks out here, Solara smirked. Martian toast, anyone. Sounds like a gritty breakfast cereal, Jax muttered, complete with extra rock bits for that authentic Martian crunch. They laughed, a sound that echoed through the battered colony. It was a rough, unrefined kind of joy, but it was real. And on Mars, that was worth more than all the alien tech in the universe. As the night crept over the dome, Rook found himself staring out at the Martian landscape, a dull red under the fading daylight. He felt a strange kind of peace, knowing they'd faced down the worst and lived to tell the tale. But he also knew it wasn't over, not by a long shot. Hey, Solara said, joining him at the dome's edge. Penny for your thoughts, Rook chuckled softly. You might be overpaying. Let's say I'm feeling generous. Solara leaned against the glass, her gaze matching his. Seriously, though, what's next? Rook scratched his chin thoughtfully. We rebuild, we prepare, and we make sure that when the Vaxari come knocking again, we've got a surprise or two waiting for them. Sounds like a plan, Solara said, her voice steady and sure. You think we can pull it off? I think we don't have much of a choice, Rook replied, his eyes reflecting the distant stars. But if anyone can make a miracle happen on this lousy rock, it's us. Solara smiled, a genuine warm thing that made the harshness of their surroundings a little more bearable. Here's to miracles, then, and to surviving another day. Yeah, Rook said, his voice a soft rumble in the night. To surviving. As they stood together, the colony's lights flickering to life around them, Rook felt a surge of determination. Mars might be a desolate, unforgiving place, but it was their desolate, unforgiving place. And for all its flaws, it was home. The next morning, the colony buzzed with activity, the kind that comes when people are trying to distract themselves from the fact that they very nearly became Martian dust yesterday. Talon Rook walked through the makeshift streets, nodding to those he passed, a silent acknowledgement of shared survival. Jax was busy tinkering with his plasma cutter, the tool's once sleek design now resembling something out of a scrapyard nightmare, held together by mismatched screws and blind optimism. Morning, Rook, he said without looking up. Feel like we've been through this before. Deja vu, Rook replied, eyeing the weapon. Or just a sign we're doing something right. Or wrong, Jax countered, tightening a bolt with a little too much enthusiasm. You know, I always thought there'd be more glory in fighting aliens. Turns out it's just a lot of dust and existential dread. You forgot about the constant threat of death and terrible food, Rook added. Jax grinned, a wicked gleam in his eyes. Ah, the Martian trifecta. How could I forget? Leaving Jax to his work, Rook continued his rounds, taking note of the patchwork repairs and the colonists' determined faces. They were bruised but not broken, each task undertaken with a grim determination that said, "We're still here, and we're not going anywhere." He found Solara in the lab, surrounded by holographic displays that were slightly more organized than a drunken octopus's sock drawer. She was deep in conversation with another engineer, gesticulating animatedly about some biotech breakthrough that sounded like science fiction to Rook. Interrupting something? He asked, leaning against the doorway. Solara glanced over, a spark of amusement in her eyes. Just the usual, trying to save our skins and make life a little less hellish out here. Any luck? Some. Turns out the alien tech has got more to offer than just pathogen neutralization. We might be able to integrate some of it into our systems, make Mars a bit more forgiving. Forgiving? Rook raised an eyebrow. Didn't know planets could hold grudges. Mars might be the first, Solara replied, a smirk tugging at her lips, but we're working on it. Good to hear, Rook said. We're gonna need every advantage we can get. As they talked, Rook couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. They were still in the fight, and with each passing day they were getting stronger. Mars was a harsh teacher, but they were learning, adapting. Maybe that was the real victory. The day wore on, each hour filled with the mundane tasks of survival, repairs, resource management, planning for the future. It wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. And in the quiet moments, Rook found himself reflecting on how far they'd come. Marshal, a voice called out, breaking his reverie. It was Lyra, one of the colony's newer recruits, her face a mix of exhaustion and determination. We've got the new filtration system ready for testing. Thought you might want to see it. Lead the way, Rook said, falling into step beside her. The filtration system was a cobbled-together affair, utilizing parts from the Vaxari tech alongside human ingenuity. It was a patchwork of metal and wires, humming with a low, steady rhythm that suggested it might actually work. Not bad, Rook said, inspecting the setup. Think it'll hold? Lyra shrugged, her expression pragmatic. We'll know soon enough. If it doesn't, well, at least we'll go out breathing slightly cleaner air. Always a silver lining, Rook replied, a wry smile on his face. "Let's hope it does the trick." The test began, the system humming to life with a quiet confidence that belied its haphazard construction. Rook watched as data flickered across the screens, each number a promise of a less lethal environment. "Looks like it's working," Lyra said, a flicker of hope in her voice. "Good," Rook replied, clapping her on the shoulder. "Keep me posted." As he left the room, Rook felt a swell of pride. They were making progress, one small victory at a time. Mars was a challenge, a constant fight for survival, but they were rising to meet it. The day drew to a close, the Martian sky painted in shades of red and gold. Rook found himself back at the dome's edge, the landscape stretching out before him in all its barren majesty. It was harsh, unforgiving, but there was a beauty to it, a stark reminder that they were part of something greater. Solara joined him once more, her presence a comforting familiarity. "Thinking deep thoughts again, Marshal." "Just reflecting," Rook said, his gaze steady on the horizon. "We've come a long way." "That we have," Solara agreed, leaning against the glass. "And there's still a long way to go." "Yeah," Rook said, his voice quiet but firm. "But we'll get there, one step at a time." As they stood together, watching the last light fade from the Martian sky, Rook felt a sense of peace. They had faced the impossible and survived. They had proven that even in the darkest corners of the universe, humanity could endure, adapt, and thrive. And as long as they had that, they had hope.